Hi everyone. My name's Susan French and I'm Chief Exec of Barnsbury Housing Association. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the consortium that we are part of, a bit about the background, why choose a consortium, and then Kasang is going to go into quite a lot of detail around how we're delivering and the key roles and strategies. So just a bit of background about the consortium that we are part of. It's called the North River Alliance, and it was actually a development consortium that was formed about 20 years ago, and it comprises of about just about a dozen small housing associations in North and North East London. It's led by Islington and Shoreditch Housing Association. And so for the past 20 years, it's been focusing on development delivery. But I think very cleverly, actually, Isha repurposed the consortium to lead a bid for the SHDF fund. I think what was interesting is that apart from my organisation, because we've done quite a lot of work around thinking about retrofit, if not doing it so far, none of the other organisations had really done very much. They were working from a standing start. And I think it's true to say that for most of us, we wanted to be part of it, but it was something of a leap of faith to kind of go into it, kind of step by step, and we're learning, at each step that we take. There are, of course, other models out there. I know there's some sort of consortia on a regional basis, some around sort of citywide. But the NRA consortium, we were successful in getting our bid for, it was about £2.5 million and 282 homes, I think, in total. So a little bit shameless self-advertisement about Barnsbury Housing Association. So you can see some of our stock there. We're a really small association, got 300 homes. We've been working a lot around net zero since about 2019-20, and we've done a lot of thinking about it. We've got a lot of listed buildings, so that's a particular focus to us, and trying to figure out how we address those. We've been doing a sort of quick wins program, and we've got quite a well-developed approach. So when we came to the consortium, I think we were in a relatively good position. We knew a lot about our stock. We had EPCs for about 85-90% of our homes. We've done a quick wins program, around draft proofing, around loft insulation. And if anybody is interested in looking at our sustainability strategy or our ESG report for last year, they're available on our website. So the obvious question is about why choose a consortium. I mean, the obvious point for the two sort of key issues for why we wanted to go into a consortium. The first is around eligibility for the SHDF programme. So there was a minimum bid size of 100 properties, and I think for most small organisations that would not be viable. Our bid was for 63. I think we're the biggest single partner within the bid, but most of us have just got a small number of homes. And I think particularly as the first time we're doing this, having a relatively small program to test it out felt the right thing to do. So coming together to make a program over the threshold was important for us. But I think the key issue really for us is, as any of you who are involved in the SHDF will know, it's really complicated. The bidding is a complicated process, reporting, just understanding the scheme and delivering it. And there's no way that we, as a small association, even having thought about it quite a lot and have got a certain degree of skills in house, there's no way that we could have done that without being part of a bigger organisation, and particularly being led by somebody really experienced like Kasang. She's the project manager for the whole consortium. There's obviously benefits around learning from each other, and then I think the other key issue is that the DESNES wants one interface. It doesn't want to be talking to 10 or 11 associations. It wants to be talking to one person, so that Kasang acts as our interface between the funders and all of the partners. And I think the other advantages are there's something around obviously keeping things on track, setting up the reporting mechanisms, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail. But we would have really found it impossible to do, I would say, unless we were part of a consortium. So I'm going to hand over to Kasang now, and she's going to take you through the process and some of the things that we've done to streamline delivery.
Thanks, Susan. I'll just touch on in a bit more detail some aspects on the delivery and what it takes to bring together in the first instance a consortia ready for the bid, and then some of the streamlined strategies that we have deployed in our consortia to allow us to have certainties on some of the caveats of the SHDF bid and delivery programme. So the first step in compiling a consortia is really to issue out an expression of interest and heads of terms. That's to give you a real idea of who is ready to join, and most importantly, to add a due date cutoff for that, because it's quite a fast-paced moving programme. We then move into selection of units. It's quite pivotal to have the data in a succinct way so that not only are you prepared for the bid, but you're also able to pass that on to consultants who are able to do the calculations as required as support documentation. We also go through a consortium-wide review of units to try and pick on any trends. A key aspect or tool that we used is Reduced Data Standard Assessment Procedure, otherwise known as RDSAP. And we use that really to streamline the whole consortia unit, circa 282, into a few different archetypes, which then we were able to package into retrofit measures per archetype. And I'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, we'll just touch on the actual SHDF bid submittal documentation itself and what's required within there. So the first step, gathering the consortia together. So issuing the EOI allows you to have an understanding of who's ready to take the next steps, having either already discussed this in their organizations or are aware of the current climate and understand that the SHDF grant would work with their organizations' existing strategies, such as their strategic plan or sustainability strategy. It can be a leap of faith, as Susan's alluded to, but it's clear and allows for people to show a clear interest or willingness to partake. So moving on from receipt of the EOI, it's to circulate and get executed heads of terms. These just really cover some of the key legalities, which are mentioned in the grant funding agreement associated with SHDF. And it allows for the whole consortium to be transparent from the offset, to highlight the legal responsibilities that are going to be imposed on them, and to show that dedication and commitment that we're on this journey together as a consortium by returning the head of terms. So we then go into asking for asset data to be given in quite a prescriptive format, which is under these formal headings. It's really for us to then be able to understand consortium-wide and cherry pick certain units for the bid that streamline the delivery from day dot. It allows us to have confidence that not only the units selected hit the caveats of the bid, but it also prepares the information in a way that our consultants have that information immediately required for their modelling and calculations as supplementary support documents in the bid. So these fall under four main categories. The first one being asset data, which is really just your location based. The second is the RDSAP data, which is the information we'll pass on to the consultants for them to demonstrate the uplift in EPCs as post-retrofit works. There's the delivery data, which is you're starting to look at the constraints and the consents required with all those units and their locations, which also taps on a bit on asset data, which will form part of this, such as boroughs, postcode, allowing you to have the ability to map locations per se for contractor reviews. And then we have the SHDF specific data. So this is what's going to come out of all of your units and what will start to give you a headline figure of what you can get from the bid in terms of your 50% RP contribution. Is that feasible for that organisation? How much the A&A you can expect and what units you're thinking to deliver in what financial year. So once you've collected all that data for your consortium, you can start to understand the headline figures in terms of trends. So for our consortia, we had 10 registered providers, 282 units split over 13 boroughs, with the majority of our EPCs being D. Circa 50% of units were in a conservation area. We had a 45-55 split for year one, year two, and we were looking at around 2.6 million in grant funding. So it's important to have this overview sooner rather than later, because the SHDF application bid is written from the lens of the consortium as a whole project, a one project, and it's not split into smaller RPs. So with the project as a whole having to demonstrate and comment on the caveats of the bid, such as 50% split year one and year two. So the sooner you can document that or understand if you're hitting that target, the better. Uniquely with our consortia, almost all units were street-facing properties, which formed the majority of our archetypes, with any said archetype being applicable to multiple RP units. So this allowed us to group the consortia units, splitting all into relevant archetype regardless of which RP was the named landlord. And we then subdivided that further using the RDSAP methodology. So for anyone who's not familiar, RDSAP is an energy assessment measure used to produce an existing EPCs, and it has very set assumptions assigned to the building's fabric in situ build-up, primarily defined by construction year and location. So by using this methodology and splitting the whole consortia stock into different archetypes, it allowed us to streamline 282 units into 6 main archetypes and 18 sub-archetypes, 34 of which had successful site visits. So ultimately, instead of visiting 282 units, we visited 1 or 2 of each sub-archetype to verify our data. So we're looking at 34 successful site visits there. Site visits also relaunched the EPCs, so we were able to use that as a check on the data. So what the pre-existing EPCs were versus what the new relaunched after the site visit came out with. And what we actually found from doing that exercise was we concluded that existing data that we had on file was 90% correct or worse. So in fact, the EPCs, once we relaunched them, were actually coming out as a worse degradation from what we had on file, with only 10% showing a slight improved EPC. And mainly that was due to either data gap or cloned results, which we've seen in the industry. So now that we've received all of that data, we looked under the archetypes and looked under how they were performing, and were able to package together a package of retrofit measures defined by archetype, aligned to the eligible measures in the SHDF bid. And that was reviewed under a hierarchy of importance in chronological order, starting with insulation, moving to cyclical and internal, and ending on heating and PVs. These were reviewed by our consultants in that running order to define exactly what measures will be required for each archetype to reach that EPCC caveat in the bid. This was undertaken on the units which had had a successful site visit and had their EPCs checked. That formed the relevant package for those retrofit measures in that defined archetype. And then this was adapted and scaled to all consortium members' units, which fell within that archetype, alongside a desktop review to allow for any glazing or any other instances to be flagged and accounted for. And once we had this package, we were then able to use a schedule of rates to then be able to get an idea of cost aligned to each package. So what we're actually doing here is streamlining all of that analysis, breaking it down into groups, applying a logic and package of measures to explain the process and quantify that against costs. So at bid submittal stage, it actually proved quite important for us to have undertaken the earlier process, as it allowed for us to already have on file all of the annexes and support documentation that was being requested. The SHDF bid submittal was actually quite extremely prescriptive and can be quite time consuming. So it's better to start preparing as soon as possible. And it allowed us, from doing that earlier exercise, to already have that on file. So it was just a reformatting exercise rather than a starting from scratch. The bid submittal itself is formed of 4 or 5 key elements. The first being the lead RP application form. This is consisted of 23 questions, which needs answers for consortium-wide anyway. And those vary from 400 to 800 words each. So they're looking for quite succinct answers. There's a supplementary Excel, which is given to you by DESNZ. It is extremely cumbersome and can be quite complex. It's an Excel with exact retrofit works having to be defined, the energy improvements forecasted being defined, the capital costs, your program, and your delivery year, as well as your ANA costs. Further than that, then we have these 10 supporting annexes, of which our consultants were able to help us formulate the majority of those. But annexes F to I and K were led by the SHDF coordinator or the lead grant recipient. That moves us nicely onto key roles and strategies. So the SHDF requires for a lead grant recipient to be named who leads the bid for any consortia. In this case, and in our consortia, that's ISHA, Islington and Shoreditch Housing Association. That lead grant recipient then has the direct comms and direct contractual link to DESNZ, with all other consortium members named as sub-consultants in a way. Every RP is responsible for their own resident liaison, delivery of their units, reporting, budget, and governance. The key role which we have introduced is the SHDF coordinator, which is K-Square's role and my role within ISHA's consortia. We act as the single point of contact for the program, appointed directly to the consortia to provide client-side oversight. At this higher role, we work with the lead grant recipient and the consortia to define the procurement strategy, define the resident engagement strategy, define the delivery strategy, and assist each RP in the uptake and deployment of those strategies within their own organizations and internal teams. We also allow for value for money reviews. We are the main point of call for anything in terms of contracts and appointments. And we are the intermediary between DESNZ and other consortium members with any key reporting requirements or comms, allowing us to have the wider oversight of the consortia budget, the reporting back to DESNZ, as well as assisting and flagging each RP with any risks that they might see quite early on. So within our consortia, this is what it looks like in person to give you a more tangible feel of how that transcends into people. So the key roles, we have the SHDF coordinator, again, as the single point of contact for the program, appointed directly to the consortia to provide client-side oversight and assistance. Within each organization, we then have two key roles. There's the higher role, which is named as the project sponsor. This is typically someone within the organization's leadership team, head of department, director, or even CEO. So as in the case of Barnsbury and many smaller RPs, that's CEO. So Susan's the CEO of Barnsbury. Second tier requires personnel with the right skill set, who will be more of like the single point of contact within that organization. So they will be the project manager, resulting in having oversight of that RP's program. There will be the feet on the ground to monitor the SHDF delivery and progress and ensure any queries are addressed to correct internal personnel for swift progression. Every consortium is unique and requires the right skill set that reflects the consortium in-house as well as externally.
So obviously the SHDF coordinator, and that's in our case, that's Kasang, it's absolutely, their role is absolutely key. And I think we've been incredibly lucky with Kasang, and it's a mix of sort of technical skills that person has and relationship management. And one of the things that's really important that they're able to do and that Kasang can do is sort of I've written it down as speaking two languages. So it's actually, you know, dealing with the consultants, dealing with the contractors, you know, the more sort of technical side of delivery, while at the same time bringing into the conversation and working with people within the housing associations themselves. And you know, they would come with a variety of skills and experience. We've got operations directors, we've got asset managers, but it's being able to sort of act as that conduit and channel between the organisations and the sort of more technical side around procurement, and be very fluid and adaptable kind of around that. So each organisation, as Kasang said, is quite different. Some of them are at quite different sort of levels. And I think not least the fact that within my organisation, we had an existing relationship with a consultant called Ambu, and they've got a lot of specialism around listed buildings. So we've been working with them previously and decided to continue that relationship. And we've managed to, you know, sort of bring them in a sense, a sort of parallel relationship within the consortium. But one of the things that the SHDF coordinator Kasang's been able to do is to sort of figure out which where the right boundaries of that relationship sit. So things like procurement, you know, we will go in with the wider consortium delivery model, whereas some other approaches we're continuing with the work that Ambu had started with us. But it's about knowing when that is possible and when you would get a better, you know, economies of scale, value for money, better delivery by working together. And I think obviously the other thing is that the incredible attention to detail that this person needs to have in terms of reporting. The other thing I would just add, in going back to the last slide around internal delivery and sort of tips and tricks, is that I'm project sponsor and I've been quite involved in it. We originally put down our asset manager as the delivery, but we actually realised that we needed a different type of set of skills when it actually came to delivering the programme. And what we felt that we needed was somebody who's got experience of managing quite complex grant funding projects, you know, cash flows, resident engagement. And we were lucky to find a really great project manager who's got a development and regen experience. So it's about understanding that things sort of change through the process, and really trying to understand what skills you need within your team to make sure that you deliver.
Thanks, Susan. And just to tap into that, like this visualizes how those key roles come into practice for our consortia. So as you can see really what that looks like when you start to appoint your expanded team. So what we have here is a single point of contact and consultant team built around the consortium that retains oversight and quality management. That's quite important as it's a 2-year fast-paced program. So it's important to get the right team in post to safeguard delivery. As Susan alluded to a bit, Barnsbury were ahead of the game in sense of having Ambu already as their consultants and onboarded for their larger sustainability strategy within their organisation. So we wanted to work with Barnsbury with that and brought them in to follow the consortium's delivery strategy. That's why you see Barnsbury slightly dashed there with their own consultants. However, everyone else within the consortium were utilising the consortium buying power and having the one-stop shop in terms of the team and the expanded team for that level of comfort for everyone else within the consortium. So it's quite important when we start to look at some of the key milestones and KPIs that you have to report on a monthly basis to DESNZ. That's where these streamlined strategies become quite important, especially in the status of which has to be reported on a monthly basis at consortium-wide level. So by appointing the same consultants with the same templates, delivering to the same language becomes ever more important, as it will allow you to have the same clarity of information when you undertake that top-up reporting to DESNZ, which is what K2 undertakes on a monthly basis on behalf of the consortium. So to bring that home in terms of the key management required for that all to run quite seamlessly does require key consistent management. There's weekly comms with the expanded consultant team. So we have a live directory, we have phone numbers, multiple email chains, group chats, individual comms going on a weekly basis. And you really need a really responsive consultant team to be a part of this. There are monthly meetings and coordinations with SHDF monthly meetings being held with consortium members and their single point of contact in their internal team to review what's happening with each individual RP's units. But then there are also reporting deadlines, which are stipulated again with each RP, so they give us that information for us to review. As SHDF coordinator, we then do a quality analysis review of all of those monthly reports. We flag any queries in our monthly meetings, and then we, on behalf of the consortium, then issue that out at consortium-wide level to DESNZ the following week. And the week after that, we have a monthly meeting with DESNZ to go through that report and explain how and why the consortium is performing towards the key milestones and KPIs. And just as you end, it starts all over again. So this is a very fast-paced moving, constant monitored program. Susan, do you want to touch on the resident relations?
Yeah, just a sort of quick insight really into resident relations. So we had done previously, we'd done some comms with our residents to try and build up a bit of a head of steam and appetite for retrofit works, and we'd had quite a lot of interest. And I think particularly because of the cost of living crisis, people are really concerned about having drafty windows and and being able to afford to heat their homes. So we knew that there was an appetite amongst our residents. Last October, just as the bid was sort of going in, we organised a meeting for all residents who were going to be part of the bid, and we had, I think we had 5 people out of 63 homes come along. So it felt, I think, quite abstract, although the people who came along were really keen. But what's made a massive difference to our resident engagement is that our project manager has been, when organising the retrofit surveys, she's been phoning everybody, having conversations, telling them about the programme, telling them about the benefits, and really sort of building up their sort of knowledge and trust really around the scheme. And what's been really interesting is that I think we've done 50 odd of our 63 surveys now, and I think we've had 2 no-shows out of all of that in terms of when the surveyors have turned up, which is unheard of really. And I think that shows the importance of that sort of personal connection, that face that people can see as the sort of face of the programme and the organisation. And the other aspect that's been really helpful for that is just the level. Avis has gone to all of our surveys and actually building up that relationship, but also getting to know the properties and getting to know the tenants in particular. Their particular situation is really helpful, and I think that will help us as we go forward to deliver.
Thanks, Susan. So we have already touched on some of the advantages, but just to go over this as a few headliners. So the obvious is the greater buying power and better value for money. So you can see that in generally you get a better fee proposal or a reduction on unit price for the more units you have. The same expanded team appointed for all members allows for knowledge retention, which can be quite pivotal with such a fast moving program. Having shared resources and knowledge pool. So you're not only upskilling one organization, but as a consortium, you're learning and growing together. They're also tapping on the more unit price. The consortium combined contract value makes it more appealing for a contractor. So if you come together and group together for one contractor, that's looking more favorable to actually get that contractor to commit. And further, then we have contingency lists. So if we are looking at a consortium wide, if one RP unit drops out, we can replace that with another RP's unit which suits and can fill that gap. DESNZ is very concerned with delivering on the amount of units of the project wide, not on an individual RP level. So to summarize, the delivery streamlined strategies as an overview are, for smaller RPs, we go through procurement via a framework. Many smaller RPs do not have a procurement arm, so to ensure due diligence and that we hit some of those SHDF prerequisites of PAS 2035, PAS 2030 certified, MSC and Trustmark, and to have certainty with an associated schedule of rates connected, we went through a framework. Define your procurement route early. We define this at bid stage and kept PAS 2035 client side to assist with the reporting and quality management that's asked for in the SHDF delivery side. Appoint expanded team early and retain them. If you keep your expanded team retained from bid to delivery, it allows for fast movement of program, again, because you've got that knowledge retention and you can sidestep non-abortive work. We've kept with the same team and Barnsbury have kept with their same consultants as well to allow for relationship to continue building through the program and as we progress. Location considerations. So, with contractor prelims, if you can start to review your units and cluster those units together and check if nearby assets can be used to offset any contractor prelims, that will help your program in terms of delivery. If you can select your units with minimal planning restraints or any consents, that hastens start on site and completion certs. Your archetype retrofit packages, that allows for one kind of fits a certain number, so you can make some assumptions there. Early engagement with residents, with resident champions, and with contractors, so that you can already have those conversations, build those relationships, which will pay due diligence dividends rather as you progress with the program. Identify easy wins for year one delivery, and then place all your high risk units in year two, just to buy yourself a bit more time. Prepare a contingency list, but be prepared to also manage that, because that will trigger some of the reporting requirements and change requests required with DESNZ. So have someone there to be your single point of contact for the program to safeguard your delivery. Let that be a team you can trust and who will work with your interests.